People smuggling is fast becoming the crime of the future. It's now as lucrative as the drugs trade, and in the UK it's worth over £250 million per year. This market in human misery is dominated by the ruthless Chinese gangs, the infamous Triads and Snakeheads.
They will suddenly burst in few people with machetes and just cut you up. Not kill you, cut you up.
From the isolated villages of China to the streets of Britain, this is the story of these gangs who smuggle tens of thousands of people into the UK every year, the police who try to catch them, and the desperate people caught in their criminal web. I'm Ragioma and I'm on a journey, crisscrossing the whole country, from Aberdeen to Southampton, London to Liverpool. And I want to understand the violent gangs, the high-tech fraudsters, and the sophisticated criminal gangs that now make up Britain's new underworld. Over 35,000 Chinese people are smuggled into Britain every year. Exploited as cheap labour, they work in our restaurants, they pick our crops, and they mend our clothes. They are smuggled into this country by ruthless Chinese Triad and Snakehead gangs. It's a highly secretive world, and we only glimpse its true scale when things go wrong. Triad gangs were behind two of the most horrific British tragedies of recent times: the deaths of 23 cockle pickers at Morecambe and 58 people in a truck at Dover. I will revisit these crime scenes to bring you the real stories behind the tragedies. I'll speak to a former Triad gang boss, and I will uncover the story of one of the most notorious Snakehead gang leaders in the UK, a woman called Sister Ping.
Hello? Right, the police, where do you need the police to, please? Diggy Walker!
In the tiny seaside town of Morecambe, police received this desperate and garbled 999 call.
Diggy Walker!
It signals the start of one of the most tragic rescue operations in recent times.
Where to? Hello, Diggy Walker! Hello?
6 miles out on the treacherous sands, 24 Chinese cockle pickers are trapped by the inrushing spring tide. A huge rescue operation is mounted, and the police helicopter records the unfolding drama on an infrared camera.
Morecambe hovercraft, 20 to 25 persons put off the top.
On the spit of land that we've got, there is only one person. We'll try our best.
Liverpool Coast Guard, call again. Rescue 128, this is Liverpool Coast Guard. Yes, you're loud and clear also, over.
Only one Chinese worker is pulled from the freezing water alive.
Okay.
Over the next few days, 21 bodies are recovered from the bay, but 2 are never found.
Like most other people, when I first heard about the deaths of the Chinese cockle pickers at Morecambe Bay, I just presumed it was a tragic accident. I had absolutely no idea that it was linked to the Chinese criminal underworld and the sinister trade in people smuggling.
These are the faces of some of the people who drowned in Morecambe Bay. But it was this man who died with them who proved the starting point for an investigation that led police into the heart of one of the most secretive and sinister gangs in the world. Mick Gradwell headed the investigation.
Tian Long is somebody who had been in the country for 7 or 8 years. He got 30 or so different aliases, a very powerful, kind of heavily built man, and he definitely had connections to Triad gangs.
But who are the Triads? What were they doing in a sleepy seaside town in North England? And how were they involved in this gruesome tragedy?
I managed to track down a former Triad gang boss who's agreed to talk to me about one of the most powerful and feared criminal organizations in the world.
The man I'm about to meet has spent 10 years in a British prison for crimes including violence and extortion he committed as a high-ranking triad leader. He has never spoken on television before. He says he found God in prison and has now become an Anglican priest.
Who are the Triads?
Well, the Triads were, how shall I put, the equivalent of the mafias. But the origin of it comes from China. They're very secretive, and they're very tough, and they can be very violent.
The Triads are the most secretive of all the gangs I have come across. It's estimated they are smuggling over 35,000 people into Britain every year. That's almost 100 every single day. The gangs operate so covertly that you only hear about them when something goes wrong, like in Morecambe. But terrifyingly, our ex-Triad claims they are operating everywhere in Britain.
You'll find them in London, in Liverpool, in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Glasgow, in Edinburgh, you know, and in big cities, yes.
How do you become a Triad member then? Do you get recruited? Do you have to come from a certain area?
You get invited like the Masonic Society.
So they have their own hand signs?
Yes. Secret handshake that you can test a person.
Could you show me?
You know, you tap. If they reply, that means they are connected.
Right.
During my conversation with Kim Go, I learnt that being a Triad, like the Italian mafia, is a way of life. He told me that they have 36 rules which govern how each member should behave.
First one is you do not betray your brothers.
Back in Morecambe Bay, Mick Gradwell was coming up against this first rule, and nobody would speak to him.
The gang masters had threatened the witnesses and said, don't identify who the gang leaders are. In fact, they were instructed to blame 2 of the deceased.
It's this culture of silence which is the major obstacle for the police investigating people smuggling rings. It was not until Mick's team raided the houses where the victims had been staying that they managed to get any leads. Inside, they found that the Chinese immigrants were living in the most appalling conditions.
This small 4-roomed flat, at different times up to 35 people were staying in the flat.
In the flats, the police uncovered evidence written in notebooks belonging to the dead workers that linked one of the dead, Qian Long, a known Triad member, to this man, Ling Yang Reng.
He just looks like a clean living student, but he's the one who ran the whole organisation.
Ling Yan Reng was convicted on 21 counts of manslaughter and sentenced to 14 years in prison. What the police investigation into the death at Morecambe revealed was how massive and organised the people smuggling operation in Britain is. After months of painstaking work, the detectives discovered an incredible web of international crime in which Triads were working with Chinese people smuggling gangs known as Snakeheads to bring tens of thousands of illegal immigrants into the UK. The immigrants would pay as much as £16,000 each to the gangs to be brought here, and then when they arrived, they were further exploited by the gangs for cheap labour.
What we found was that there was a large number of people being trafficked into the country, and they'd start off in London, and then the organisation would move into where the economic opportunities were, and Ling Yang Ren's organisation of Cockling was just one of these.
What exactly is the relationship between the Triads and Snakeheads?
They are part of the Triads, basically, in a sense, that they're members of Triads, okay, of Triad families, and they are the one who would organize smuggling of people out.
The trafficking of illegal Chinese immigrants into Britain is worth a staggering £250 million a year. I've been put in touch with a woman who was smuggled into the UK from China by a Snakehead gang. She is now in hiding and is terrified for her life. She's only agreed to be interviewed if we keep her identity a secret.
因为舌头太怕了，太可怕了，他们动不动都说割脚筋啊，什么割这个脚筋啊什么的。他说叫你死你就死啊，因为舌头很厉害，找很容易找到嘛。
There are tens of thousands of illegal Chinese immigrants working in our shadow economy. They have been found doing menial jobs across the whole of the UK, from picking crops in Norfolk to processing fish in Scotland and cutting daffodils in Cornwall. I've discovered that once here, these illegal workers can be paid as little as £1 a day for the jobs they do, and incredibly, from this they are expected to pay off their debts to the snakehead gangs who smuggle them here. Tens of millions of pounds can be made by these gangs, and as I was about to learn, one of the most ruthless and terrifying snakehead bosses to ever operate in the UK was a woman called Sister Ping. I'm investigating the mysterious world of the Chinese Triad and Snakehead people smuggling gangs. In popular imagination, it's a world of martial arts and flying daggers. In fact, the truth is much more terrifying. The gangs operate through subtle fear and intimidation that is hidden within the Chinese community. And it's only when things go badly wrong that we glimpse the true scale of this deadly trade in human cargo that's going on right under our noses. Tens of thousands of Chinese people are working illegally here in the UK in our hidden economy. They are smuggled into the country by snakehead gangs. I've discovered that one of the most successful and feared of all the snakehead gang bosses is a woman called Sister Ping.
Hello?
The female voice on this police surveillance tape is that of Sister Ping, aka Jingping Chen. Barely 5 feet tall and in her late 30s, Sister Ping was renowned to be the most ruthless gang leader in Europe. She first came to the attention of British police for her suspected involvement in a chilling international kidnap operation. In a dispute over smuggling debts, 5 Chinese illegal immigrants were held hostage in a West London flat by snakehead gang members for 10 days. Their families in China were forced to listen to the screams of their relatives on the phone while they were being tortured.
It's not an exclusively male thing. So it can be...
There are women triads. They can just be as vicious, if not more, some of them.
You may be unfamiliar with the name of Sister Ping, but you will be familiar with the horrific tragedy she was behind. Late one night in June of 2000, customs officials stopped a suspicious lorry on arrival in Dover. Behind the pallets of tomatoes stacked up to hide its real load, they found 58 dead Chinese illegal immigrants and just 2 survivors. Former Detective Chief Inspector Bob Nelson was called in that night and led the investigation into this gruesome people smuggling operation gone wrong.
Bob, could you tell me what confronted you once you arrived down at Dover Dock?
There was real carnage, discarded clothing, so a real devastating scene.
Predominantly young people. They had met a most unpleasant death.
When police used 58 Gurkhas to recreate the cramped conditions inside the sealed container, it showed just how merciless the gang were and how horrific the immigrants' deaths must have been as they slowly suffocated. Police found some of the dead holding on to each other.
They had sort of tried to comfort each other as they probably realized the inevitability of the situation.
China's huge rural population suffers from extreme poverty, and they are increasingly turning to snakehead gangs to help them leave the country and seek a better life abroad. I tracked down a Chinese illegal immigrant who was smuggled into Britain. It took over 6 months for her to get here.
哦，这路上什么都是那个舌头逮的路，还有一次坐船，还有几次从那个也坐那个火车，从那个一路反正都有舌头接送什么的，害怕。
Chinese people pay the snakehead gangs huge sums of money to be smuggled out of China and into the West. But my investigations have revealed that amazingly they have no idea where their final destination is.
A lot of the time, you're not exactly sure where you're going. I mean, according to my clients, they know that they're going to Western Europe. I mean, are they able to get to France, Germany, Holland, and England? It's by luck. You know, depending on what's the circumstances at the time. Is it very, very tough? Are they being checked very carefully? It's not like going on holidays. I want to go to that destination. It doesn't exist that way.
The Chinese woman I spoke to had to pay £16,000 to a snakehead gang to be smuggled into the UK. As soon as she arrived in the UK, her family in China were expected to pay the fee. Unfortunately, the family didn't have all the money, so the gang held her hostage for over a week until the debt was paid. She told me that during this time she was beaten and then raped by the gang.
对呀，钱也是钱没有还进去，再一点他也是在那边。后来我也不知道，就问了几句，他就把我打了一下嘛，就是撇过去，就是这打过去，后来人就迷迷糊糊的，就被他那个好像都没有还银掉了。
A former Triad member told me more about how these ruthless gangs use fear and intimidation to make sure they get paid.
It's usually by threats, but very subtle threats. Say, for example, they will come and show you photographs of your children and your wife and ask you, oh, do you know this family? So that's very subtle, isn't it?
But if these threats fail, they will not hesitate to resort to more shocking and extreme measures.
Chinese used to go to the restaurant for lunch, isn't it? And it's very crowded, and there will suddenly burst in few people, and they would, with machetes, and just cut you up. Not kill you, cut you up.
To me, snakeheads are violent gangsters exploiting the desperate, but I was surprised to learn that to many of the Chinese, they are merely seen as travel agents.
Majority of the Chinese view snakeheads as a necessary, like a travel agent. They don't actually particularly see them as bad. They actually see them as necessary. A lot of them actually see them as necessary, as the only way they can actually get out of China.
At Dover, the police investigation to find the snakeheads behind the lorry tragedy had no leads, until searchers of the crime scene uncovered suspicious telephone numbers hidden in the clothing of the dead victims.
Well, there's one number that we discovered had appeared 27 times within various people in the back of the lorry, and we identified that through the mobile phone owner to a lady called Guo.
Guo, captured here on CCTV during her arrest, was a Chinese interpreter living in London who was set to meet the smuggled immigrants. She was jailed for 6 years for her part in the smuggling operation, but her Triad code of silence meant that she refused to reveal the name of her boss. With the trail in Britain dead, the police, with the help of the Dutch authorities, pieced together the complex continental side of the smuggling operation and soon arrived at a familiar name, Sister Ping.
Sister Ping came up regularly as potentially being at a high level within this criminal organisation.
During her reign as Europe's most prolific people smuggler, she was thought to have brought over 7,000 people into the UK. It's estimated she made over £10 million. The police knew she was behind the Dover tragedy, but they couldn't gather enough evidence to prosecute her, yet.
Hello?
This is one of over 12,000 phone calls recorded by police as they try to build a case against Sister Ping. She is heard discussing a smuggling operation that has gone wrong with a Triad associate based in Hungary. Using these phone taps, the Dutch police managed to gather enough evidence to prosecute Sister Ping. But even then, because no one would testify against her, they couldn't charge her with the most serious crime of people smuggling. She was jailed for just 3 years. What the Dover tragedy and the story of Sister Ping revealed was how intricate the web of international people smuggling is.
It's slavery, modern-day slavery. The methods might change, but objectives do not change. Objective is to exploit the poor and the needy and the helpless.
Even with the arrest of Sister Ping, the trade in human smuggling shows no sign of slowing down. Britain's shadow economy has an almost insatiable demand for cheap, illegal labour. And there is a very well-organised snakehead crime network throughout Britain that is happy to exploit poor and desperate Chinese people in order to feed that demand.
I don't see how you can actually imagine stopping people coming into this country. Even the Berlin Wall couldn't stop people going out. How are you going to actually stop people coming in? You can have a British war, but even with a war, people will still be able to come in, one way or another.
Ironically, the stronger the border controls become, the more the snakeheads can charge for their service. During our investigation, I've learned that the average price a Chinese person will pay to be smuggled into Britain has now risen from £16,000 to almost £25,000.
The 58 illegal Chinese immigrants who died at the hands of the snakeheads in the back of that lorry in Dover were pursuing a dream of a better life for them and their families. They weren't supposed to die because from the point of view of the snakeheads, it's not good for business. But the truth is, there are plenty more people like them prepared to take the same risks and make the same journey in pursuit of exactly the same dreams.
When you see 21 bodies that were recovered in a mortuary, it does have a significant impact, and particularly as you then build up a story of each person so they don't just become a body.
With hundreds of Chinese immigrants being smuggled into Britain every single day by ruthless snakehead and triad gangs, it seems to me that it will only be a matter of time before we see another Morecambe or Dover-type tragedy. Next time on Crime Invasion, the brutal Turkish gangs that control Britain's heroin epidemic.
At the back! At the back! At the back! Open his knife! Open your knife, darling!
Torture them with a hammer, pliers, cut bits of their body off.
Get up now! Stop fucking about!